Y'all, I am so worked up today because I'm having deja vu to 2020. Like, are we really doing this again? Okay, there is a reason why your friends, why so many women in my DMs have yet again fallen for the very same psychological and political traps that were laid for us in 2020. And in some ways, were laid for us all the way back in the Garden of Eden. And man, I am analyzing all of that for you today. I think it's going to bring you a lot of clarity on these subjects. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com. Use code Allie at checkout. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. You know what I'm going to say. Maybe this is your first time listening to Relatable, so you don't know. But if you know, you know. God's eternal plan of redemption is going off without a hitch. It doesn't always make headlines. It doesn't always go viral. And yet he is always working. He is always finding the lost sheep. He is always accomplishing his will. And one day he is coming back and he will rule in perfect peace, and every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That is really, really good news. And yet, that future hope does not mean that what is happening right now does not matter. He has placed us on this tiny speck of eternity, on this small plot of the earth, because he does everything with purpose. He does everything with intention. Nothing is an accident. Nothing is without thought or care. He does everything in perfect accordance with his will. And our job is to make this small plot of the earth, this small speck of eternity, better for his glory and the good of those around us. And that can look like a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean having a podcast or giving a speech or having any kind of public platform. It can mean changing a diaper. It can mean washing dishes. It can mean running errands. All of these things can be done with excellence and for the glory of God. That's something that we say on the show a lot. Do the next right thing in faith with excellence and for the glory of God. No moment, no matter how mundane in the life of the believer, is wasted. All of it is creating an eternal glory that echoes in eternity. And so let's do what we can to make each moment count and to make sure that we are fulfilling whatever the calling is that God has in our life at this season. As I'm starting this episode, as I'm starting this day, I just want to be honest with you. I've got a bit of a frustration going here because I feel a lot of deja vu in 2026. It feels a lot like the summer of 2020. And what I'm realizing is that not everyone in my audience, and certainly not everyone in your lives, have been really paying attention to politics and news for 5 years. It's hard to believe that it's been 5 years. It feels like all of that just happened yesterday. That was a very tenuous moment. We had COVID. We were still trying to figure out what was going on. May of 2020, when George Floyd died, while Derek Chauvin was kneeling on his back, we were just kind of waking up to the fact that 2 weeks to slow the spread wasn't really going to happen. People were starting to get very feverish about things like masks. We were getting a lot of propaganda. It was almost like Trump's enemies realized that they could harness this as a tool to try to help him lose the election. And then George Floyd happens, the riots happen, the protests. And of course, you remember that right away, the reaction by most people, especially in the evangelical world, was to condemn racism, to condemn police brutality, to condemn white supremacy, to almost apologize to their Black friends, to post the Black square, maybe put their Christian spin on it, but to at least acknowledge the narrative that George Floyd and other people who are detained by the police or who are killed by the police who look like George Floyd are treated in that way because not only the cop is racist, but because our system is racist, because our institutions are racist. And that is why it is justified to be outraged about George Floyd dying, but to be completely silent about someone like Justine Damon or Tony Timpa, who also died at the hands of the police, but they didn't have the right skin color. And so they didn't point to the systemic white supremacy, the institutional racism that has plagued our country since its very beginning. We had the 1619 Project, and I was so disappointed and so frustrated and a little bit scared as seemingly someone on an island is a white evangelical woman who, when I looked at my feed filled with black squares, said, well, I don't think I'm going to do that because I don't have any clue that racism had anything to do with this. I'm not seeing any indication from this situation that Black lives don't matter in this country. And so I'm not going to repeat the mantras. And I'm not trying to say, gosh, I was just so wise. I was not the only one. I had been doing this for an amount of time, and I had seen the media lie, especially when it came to racial narratives. I remembered Michael Brown, and I was like, this is all too familiar. They lied about hands up, don't shoot back in 2014, 2015. The DOJ admitted to that. The Washington Post admitted to that. Why should this be any different? And I started to push back very gently back then, but push back against those popular narratives. It was very, very unpopular to do that. I was absolutely lambasted by fellow Christians. A lot of you know their names, very popular Christians and influencers and Bible study leaders who probably would have called themselves evangelical or conservative evangelicals, who said that I was being racist, that I was being mean-spirited, that I, of course, didn't have enough empathy. And mind you, I was not even as direct as I am now about that. I was simply saying, we don't know that racism is a part of this. And there are people of other skin colors who have also had unfortunate interactions with the police. And I don't think we're getting the facts here. And oh, by the way, I don't think burning down a Jiffy Lube is going to help things. And I'm not sure about stealing a plasma screen TV. I don't know if that counts as justice. Like, I just didn't get along with this, like, riots are the voice of the unheard. What do you mean they're unheard? Like, that doesn't even make sense. That's just not true. That's not politically true. I mean, Black Americans have a large segment of the vote. They almost always vote Democrat. Barack Obama won his election 2 years in a row. It's not true that these voices are politically unheard, but that was used by Christians to justify violence and to check themselves and to check their privilege and to commit to being an anti-racist, which, as Ibram X. Kendi said, means discriminating against white people today. And I had read too much Thomas Sowell and too much Walter Williams at that point in my life to buy into that. But I'm telling you, for real, it was really hard. It would have been so much easier at the time to shut up about that and to just not say anything, to just post the black square. Honestly, we've all forgiven the people who posted a black square out of ignorance then. I really have. And it would have been fine. I probably wouldn't have lost any followers if I hadn't said anything. And I would have been able to keep those very, important connections within the evangelical world and maybe invited more to their conferences if I had just kind of stayed out of that. But it puts a bug in my craw when people suspend their judgment, when people suspend their discernment, that I see them exercise in other areas, their intellect, that I see them use to defend the Bible or to tell the truth in other areas. But when it comes to these very emotional so-called social justice issues like race or like social justice, they no longer think. Because, and here's the reason why. One, it's because a lot of people have really big hearts, and I think that's good. Like, it's good to have big hearts. It's good to be compassionate. You don't want to get hard-hearted and you don't want to get calloused. Like, I am totally with you on that. All people, no matter their background, no matter their nationality or citizenship status or made in the image of God, we care about who they are. We care about their hearts and souls and how they're treated and all of that. That's absolutely true. So that's one part of it. But let's just be honest about the other part of it. Is that, and I'll get to how all of this relates in 2026. You're probably already seeing it. This is all just like coming to my mind as it's stream of consciousness. That it is inconvenient to think when it comes to those issues, okay? It's inconvenient to think because if you let your mind start asking questions like, oh, what if this is not really true? Like, what if America isn't really systemically racist? Like, what if George Floyd wasn't actually murdered by Derek Chauvin? What if Derek Chauvin wasn't actually a racist? Like, what if, like, all of this is a big lie? And all of these corporations and all of these politicians and all of these pastors that I trust and all of these friends that I love, they're buying into lies and they're very tied to it. And they're actually saying that they're going to basically excommunicate anyone who doesn't agree with them. Well, if I start thinking, then I might realize that they're all believing a lie. And if I realize they're believing a lie, well, then I'm going to feel some kind of obligation and burden to tell them the truth. And if I tell them the truth, they're going to be mad at me. And then that puts me outside of social circles. That cuts off my friendships. That makes it really hard with my family. Most people, and I would say women especially, who are naturally compassionate and naturally relational, are not willing to do that because it's very uncomfortable. And naturally, like, we don't like discomfort, myself included. But I don't know if it's just my personality, if it's how God made me. I know He made many of you like this and many of the guests that sit on my show in a variety of ways. It just bothers me. Like, it bothers me when smart people allow their feelings to take over. And so that's why I started talking about the statistics, the numbers, the arguments, the history when it came to these claims of systemic racism within the police system and these disparate views of justice and what biblical justice looks like versus what social justice looks like. And I was just one of many voices speaking up against this at the time. And we finally felt like in the past couple of years, we got them. Like, we got those people back, those people who were just lost to the propaganda of BLM and lost their minds during that time, like basically advocating for reparations and stuff. Okay, they seem to be walking it back. They're not as woke as they were back then. They're not sharing the ridiculous views. They're kind of at least quieting down on politics, which is honestly preferable. Like, it's preferable if you just don't talk about it, if you don't really know the other side of the story and you're not willing to research and all of that. Instead of, just speaking up when Trump does something wrong or when it's popular to do so or when the media tells you to do so, like, I would rather you just not say anything at all. And now we have these immigration stories. Now we have the Renee Good story, and I am seeing the same thing over and over again. We see a story about an old man who is being let out in his underwear, and people are saying, see, ICE is cruel. And I just want to say, you don't even know the context. You don't know who he is. He could have been an illegal alien from Guatemala and a sex predator. You have no idea, and you're out there defending this guy because someone put emotional music behind an Instagram video. You have no idea. And by the way, there seems to be multiple angles of this story. And that's enough for us to say, hang on, we don't really know what's going on. Maybe I shouldn't share that. Maybe that shouldn't change my political alignment because I don't know the other side of the story. The government says, which you shouldn't unconditionally believe the government, but the DHS says that guy was harboring a sex predator and illegal aliens. And because he was in the home and refused to give his identification, they had to detain him temporarily, even though he is a citizen, and then release him. So that's one side of the story. At the very least, even if you don't want to buy that, you can say, okay, there are two competing narratives here. Maybe I shouldn't just unconditionally believe one. The same thing with this child. Like, we see the story going around of this 5-year-old who I saw someone post that this child was used as bait to try to get his parents to come out so that ICE could detain them. That's the one side of the story. No sources cited, by the way, just that's what they claimed. Well, the government, again, take it as you will, says, no, that's not what happened. He was in the car with his parents. We were trying to detain his parents, and his parents fled on foot and abandoned the child. Okay, that tells me there are at least two competing narratives when it comes to this. Why would I just buy in to what the media says? Shouldn't buy into what the government says necessarily, but it should make us think. It should make us ask questions. It should make us pause and say, is this familiar? Because headline after headline in 2020 was sympathetic to those rioters while they were telling all of us not to go to church, by the way. They were supporting these mobs of people out there burning down gas stations. That was okay, but we couldn't go to church because it might spread COVID. Like, these are the same people. These are the same journalists. This is the same media, and this is the same thing. Like, think about for a second. Obama deported over 3 million people, okay? He holds the record right now. Maybe Trump will surpass him this term. We'll see. But he holds the record. Over 3 million people Obama deported. That's more than any other president in history. Do you think that under his direction, ICE was just sweet? Do you think that they didn't enter into churches and didn't enter into people's homes? Do you think it was all just like gentle and kind and just, and that's why you didn't see any protests? No, the reason you didn't see the social media posts, the reason you didn't see the headlines, the reason you didn't see the protests and riots is not because it was happening differently. It's because it was Obama and now it's Trump. That's the difference. So just know that you are being agitated by people who just don't like Trump. It's not that they care about migrants, they care about immigration, they care about justice. Maybe partly they do. They're only saying it now because it's Trump. They didn't even say it under Obama. Biden deported hundreds of thousands, if not a million, illegal aliens. He also had ICE operating under him. You didn't see any of this then. This stuff was happening then. It's because of Trump. Okay? And so, it just really bothers me how people just don't stop and ask questions. But is this true? I see smart people on my side of issues who think very critically when it comes to the media reporting on things like abortion or something else. And they'll say, well, that's probably not true because of this. And they'll dig into it. But then we'll just share headlines by the same media outlets without thinking, but are they telling the truth on this? So that's all I want. I don't want you to listen to me unconditionally. I don't want you to listen to the media or the government or any one person unconditionally. Okay? I want you to, when I tell you something, I want you to ask the same question that you would ask if you were reading the Washington Post or watching CNN or listening to Trump talk. And that is that true? Is that true? Is there more context to the story that I don't know? Or is there an alternative explanation? Am I being given all of the facts here? I want you to ask those questions to yourself when you are listening to me or to anyone else, because there are a lot of people out there who want you to be dumb. Know that, women. There's a lot of people out there who want you to be stupid because that behooves them. It's in their interest for women to be as stupid as possible. I don't want that. Okay? Even if you disagree with me, even if you are a liberal, know that the liberals who are talking to you want you to be stupid and they want you to feel your way through politics. I want you to be smart and think your way through politics. Even if you end up at a different conclusion than me, even if you never listen to my podcast again, I want you by the end of my podcast to feel like you are smarter and you at least have a direction to go in to study more and to be a thoughtful person. Okay? That's how I want you to navigate this. I want you to think, because women, you are not just feelers, okay? You are not led by your emotion. You are not stupid. You have been given a brain that is capable of critical thinking, capable of studying, capable of asking questions and being rational and reasonable. Do not prove the stupid manosphere people right by being an idiot. Think. Be compassionate, but don't allow that to suspend your discernment. Okay? So that's my little extemporaneous monologue, because we're going to go into the actual thing that I want to talk about, which is why women have veered to the left. This is the bug in my craw. This is part of why I do what I do, is because this irks me so much. I want better for our world, and I want better for women, especially Christian women. And there was this article that went viral about why women have gone left, not just in America, but everywhere, that I thought was just so insightful. We'll get into that in just a second. Let me pause. Let me tell you about our first sponsor for the day. And that is Alliance Defending Freedom. Y'all, I love Alliance Defending Freedom. I was just with them in DC. I got to speak on a panel with a few awesome women when they were celebrating going to the Supreme Court, defending Title IX, defending women's and girls' rights to compete against other women and girls. It's crazy that we're having that conversation, but we can't apparently even agree on what the definition of a woman is. But the truth is, girls are competing against biology. They're not competing against an identity. And Alliance Defending Freedom knows that. They're the ones taking up these cases, not just cases for fairness and rights of girls, but also free speech cases, religious liberty cases, people who can't defend themselves and are being attacked by progressive activists. Their constitutional liberties and rights are being attacked. Alliance Defending Freedom takes up their cause. Kristen Wagner is the CEO. She's amazing. She's been on the show a few times. Like, they're the real deal. She is a strong Christian. She believes not only in Jesus, but also believes in the Constitution. And they take that with them all the way up to the Supreme Court. If you want to join them in fighting for our liberties, in fighting for the voiceless who need their constitutional rights defended. Go to joinadf.com/Allie. Claim your free prayer guide on this issue, the issue of gender, but all kinds of issues at joinadf.com/Allie. So an article went viral by someone who goes by Vittorio on X, and it's titled "Why Young Women Moved Left While Young Men Stayed Sane." It's something that we've talked about a lot, but he really digs into the data. So in this article, he highlights that Bill Ackman, he's kind of like a red-pilled billionaire hedge fund manager. He quote tweeted a graphic illustrating the growing partisan gap between men and women in the U.S. And he pointed out, or this graph highlights rather, that this has almost doubled. The political gap between men and women has almost doubled from 12 points in 2000 to 23 points in 2023. So women have long leaned a little bit more liberal, but that gap has widened so much. So Ackman quote tweeted this and asked a simple question: why? Which is something that all of us have been exploring for a long time. But the answer is not entirely simple. Like, we could talk about social media, we could talk about all kinds of things. But this account, Vittorio, he asserts that this narrative of men drifting to the far right are false. And we can put up the full screens there, 43. And this person named, I don't even know who this is. But this person is pointing out on X that this idea that men are being radicalized, that they're going way to the far right, is not true based on the data. And we can pull up full screen too. And that shows that, look, if you see those lines, if you're watching on YouTube, which I encourage you to do because we got a lot of graphs, you can see that men aren't really changing all that much when it comes to their politics. There's a little bit of change for sure, but it hasn't changed all that much. Whereas women, you see that going up, that arrow going up, it has changed so much since 1990, since the early 2000s. And here's the troubling thing. We're looking at this graph right now. This is a Gallup poll. We are looking at South Korea, where that's occurred. We're looking at the U.S., where that's occurred big time. Yikes. Yucky. Germany, where that's occurred. And then the UK. Oh, the UK is beating us in a very horrible way there. And it's so strange because South Korea has very different problems than the U.S. And the U.S. has different problems than Germany. And like South Korea has all kinds of like issues going on there, actually, like with male politics and all of that. And yet we are seeing the same trends. So this guy, Vittorio, he claims that, now, obviously, I don't believe in evolution because it's not true. We were all created by a God in his image. God created Adam and Eve as adults who were able to procreate and then populate the earth. But this guy is looking from an evolutionary perspective. He claims that evolutionary factors set the stage for this leftward shift. So I'll read you what he said, but then also just realize that how we interpret this is that God made women with a particular propensity. So he says women evolved in environments where social exclusion carried enormous survival costs. You can't hunt pregnant. You can't fight nursing. Survival required the tribe's acceptance, their protection, their food sharing, their tolerance of your temporary vulnerability. Millions of years of this, he says, which of course don't agree with that. And you get hardware that treats social rejection as serious threat, or we're just all social creatures. Of course, we read in scripture that man cannot live by bread alone. Actually, we can see that in the person of who God is, that he is Father, Son, Holy Spirit, eternally in communion with himself. And in the very beginning, God says it is not good for man to be alone. So he makes himself a helper fit for him, or God makes him a helper fit for him. And that is Eve. So actually, we see from the very beginning how God hardwired us, not evolution hardwired us, is for community. But I do agree that women especially love that social cohesion. All of us do. And we want inclusion more than we want leadership, for sure. So he goes on to argue, however, men face different pressures: hunting parties, gone for days, exploration, combat. You had to tolerate being alone, disliked, outside the group for extended periods. I'm sorry, I'm just like kind of like smirking because evolution just like makes me laugh. Men who handled temporary exclusion without falling apart had more options, more risk-taking, more independence, more ability to leave bad situations. But again, we can look at male biology and see that they were built more for war and for hunting and for that kind of thing. And we can look at how their brains work and how testosterone works to kind of give us the answers for why that is. And God made them that way. This person, however, proceeded to cite a study by David Schmidt, who found the same personality patterns across 55 different cultures. Women average higher agreeableness, higher neuroticism, so that's sensitivity to negative stimuli, including social rejection cues. And that's just true. Like, as a woman yourself, being around women, you just know that that's true. Men average higher tolerance for disagreement and social conflict. And these are averages. They're obviously anomalies. The differences aren't huge, but they're consistent across every culture study. So he is arguing that is why you actually see this as a universal phenomenon, that women are going in the same direction politically. Did we put up full screen 44? A 2011 study titled Gender Differences in Personality Across the 10 Aspects of the Big Five found that women on average exhibited higher rates of the trait agreeableness than men. So that's not just that one study. There are other studies saying this. The two factors determined to have a genetic impact on agreeableness were compassion and politeness. Like, I know that I gave that whole rant in the beginning, but this is like on a day-to-day basis. I really want to be agreeable. I'll just tell you a story. I'll be a little bit vulnerable for a second. And maybe there are men who would do this too, of course, but I was kind of beating myself up about it the other day. I was in New York and I had a makeup artist that I don't use, sweet as pie. We had a great conversation, and we were talking about that we're the same age, and I said when my birthday was, and she was like, "Oh, you're an Aquarius," and started talking about that, and I just nodded my head and didn't really say anything because it was awkward. And so I should have been like, I don't really agree with that. And that could have been an opportunity to share the gospel. There have been times when I'm very grateful that the Holy Spirit empowered me to do that. That was not one of those times. But like in those moments, we've all had those moments where we just want to be agreeable. Like we feel compassion for this person. We want to feel polite. We don't want to be at odds with them, especially when we're in conversation. Well, you take that like one awkward scenario and you extrapolate that, or you make that bigger in how you live your life and make even big political decisions. You can see how that leads someone in the direction of following the cultural zeitgeist, which is progressivism. This study goes on to say individuals with these traits were more likely to pursue cooperation and social harmony. I would add, at whatever cost. The researchers theorized that these traits were naturally selected to yield better results in raising children. So there is good reason why we like cooperation. These are not all bad things. These can help in being good moms. Women were found to have a more independent self-construal than men, meaning their sense of self includes others. Men, on the other hand, according to the study, were more likely to obtain a mate by exhibiting more aggressive, risk-taking behaviors. And there's actually an interesting book that y'all should read on this, Your Brain on Birth Control. She also talks about from an evolutionary perspective, but she talks about how women who are on the birth control pill and therefore aren't ovulating are attracted to sissy men. Yeah, like they're attracted to girly men in some cases. Sorry, related bros out there, if your wife is on birth control. I'm sure it's not true about you. But in general, it changes your hormones, it changes who you're attracted to. And women who were not on birth control were more likely to be attracted to like masculine men. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Our bodies are so intricate, how God made us and our hormones and our makeup and the things we are attracted to and the things we do. According to the study, men were more likely to develop a sense of self separate from the group. And so that is part of the psychology, I think, of what is going on here. And that is so like Satan, by the way, to manipulate women and to use really good things about ourselves and to use them as a hook for propaganda and to ask the age-old question, did God really say? So I don't want you to hear this psychologizing of women as saying these are all the negative aspects of us. It's just that all of these good things about us make us more susceptible to lies. We've got more on this in a second. Let me pause, tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Legacy Box. I absolutely love this company and this concept. If you're anything like my mom, or maybe your mom is something like my mom, you've got a bunch of VHS tapes with home videos from 1992 lying around, and they're really precious. They might not be the highest quality, but I love watching these, and the thought of them going away or not being able to preserve them makes me really sad. Or all of the Polaroids, the old pictures that my mom has. I mean, she's very well organized. She's got boxes of all of these pictures, and some of them are really old from the time like my grandmother was little, when she was little. And I love all of these memories, but it would be great to just put them in one place. You don't want something to happen to these and you don't have them to pass on. That's what Legacy Box does. You fill the box that they send you with these VHS tapes with all of these pictures, and they digitize them and put them all in one spot. They send them right back to you. And then you have all of these forever. You have the hard copies if you prefer that, but you also have this digital file that you can then pass on to future generations. So to get 55% off, go to legacybox.com/Allie. That's legacybox.com/Allie. Okay, according to Gallup, from 2000 to 2007, 28% of women aged 18 to 29, we've got the lines up there, were 3% more likely than men. Only 3% more likely than men to identify as liberal? That's crazy. That's only a little bit more. Then from 2008 to 2016, 32% of that same demographic identified as liberal, 5 points higher than males, okay? So it's happening a little bit more. You've got the Obama presidency, you've got BLM, you've got wokeness, you've got the police brutality protests and all of that. Obama accelerated progressivism so much, it's unreal. From 2017 to 2024, a stunning 40% of women 18 to 29 identified as liberal. So now 15 points higher than men. You've got George Floyd, you've got the COVID lockdowns, all the stuff that we talked about in the beginning. There's something about Trump that a lot of feminists just had an aversion to, which, like, I understand that. But again, I think in a lot of cases, it's unreasonable to think about policy like that. By comparison, so we're breaking all of this down. By comparison, the percentage of men in that age group identifying as liberal has hovered around 50% during that period of time. But I guess, I mean, if I were to guess that if you looked at the views of those 50% of men and maybe the 50% of men who are conservative too, that their views have become more polarized. There was this study that I used to cite all of the time, Pew Research 2017, and it talked about the polarization of politics and how we've become more polarized. Like if you look back to 1990, we had left, right, most of us in the middle, and you just had a few people off to the side. But after the Obama presidency specifically, things changed drastically. We became a lot more polarized. But the polarization was not the fault of conservatives. Republicans, they broke it down when it came to guns, when it came to immigration, when it came to social issues like marriage and things like that. Really didn't change. In fact, in some of those cases, they became a little bit more liberal, like on gay marriage and things like that. It was the left that got drastically further left. And if I can find that study, I will link it for you so you can see it. And it's a little aged at this point, but I think it just goes to show that what changed during that time was the Obama presidency. That even though people on the left see him as this unifying guy, he was an extremely polarizing figure. He made so much about race. He went on his apology tour. He so drastically changed the spirit of America. And then, of course, Trump was the polar opposite of that. And so you could see why that just kind of sparked this incredible, not incredible in a good way, but a terrible conflict that we have. Okay, then we look at social media and how this plays into like male-female psychology in our politics. Technology meets biology. That's one of the lines in this article. So this guy, Vittorio, claimed that the social media ecosystem was a vehicle for women's leftward shift. Social media is a consensus engine, he says. You can see what everyone believes in real time. Disagreement is visible, measurable, and punishable at scale. The tribe used to be 150 people. Now it's everyone you've ever met, plus a world of strangers watching. Vittorio also points out that the gender politics gap started to accelerate around 2007. I think this is full screen one, after the release of the first iPhone. Although smartphones weren't designed to prey upon women, they ended up capturing females into feedback loops. And I think, again, this goes back to like women hardwiring. This machine wasn't designed to capture women specifically, he says. It was designed to capture attention, but it captures people more susceptible to consensus pressure more effectively. Women are more susceptible on average, so it captured them more. I think that is 100% true. Like those of us who grew up, thank the good Lord above, before Snapchat and before this kind of social media. Like, think about the pre-social media days and the things that like we did get addicted to easily, like texting and being in the loop that way. Like we cared, I know boys care about this to a degree, but we cared a lot about getting invited, and being left out was like the worst thing that you could possibly do. And when you think about boys, and I know this could be hard for some boys, they can prove themselves on a field through athletics or through different ways. Well, women have to prove themselves socially. And the factors contributing to what is cool socially or what qualifies you to be included or popular or whatever are always changing and are so dependent on a variety of factors. And I think that's why it was already hard to be a middle school or high school girl. And then you add social media on top of that, where you didn't have to wait until Monday to know that you missed out on something. You knew in the moment that you missed out on it. That just made it hard. And I think it increased the desperation to be liked, to be included, and to not be bullied. So there's this feedback loop, he says. Women complain more than men. I think that's just true in general. Scroll any platform and it looks like women are suffering more. That's such a good distinction, that complaining more doesn't necessarily correlate with suffering more. That's so interesting, actually, when you pause for a second, that we assume that all of these victim groups are suffering more because they say they're suffering more. But complaining is not the same thing as suffering. Something to think about for all of us. Institutions respond to the complaints, this person points out, because visible distress creates liability, PR risk, and regulatory pressure. In addition, women are weaker and inevitably seen as the victim in most scenarios. It's true. We're just like physically smaller. The institutional response is to make environments safer. We are also more safety prone. That's like why I'm the one who is like, I see moms and dads at the park, and I really try not to do this. I really don't do this. And sometimes it's been the right move and sometimes it's the wrong move. I try not to stalk my kids on the playground. Like there are moms, like afraid that their 4-year-old can't climb the ladder. And I know there are stipulating circumstances, but your 4-year-old can probably climb the ladder. And if falling is not going to like seriously injure them, then the risk is worth it. But that takes effort on my part. Like that takes conscious, like sitting on my hands and self-control, whereas men are just more prone to taking risks and even allowing their children to take risks. So making an environment safer, he points out, not just playgrounds, but, in the adult world, means removing conflict. That means censoring disagreement. That's something that women are typically uncomfortable with. It means the consensus strengthens. It means that anyone who disagrees with you is not only seen as someone who's disagreeing with you, this is my commentary, but actually an oppressor, someone who is unsafe, someone who is harmful. You see this manifest itself so much. Meanwhile, Vittorio claims that men retreated into dopamine hamster wheels, interesting way to put it, rather than affirmation loops. So women got ideological conformity from social media. Men got withdrawal. They got porn. They got video games. They got gambling apps, outrage content. The male capture wasn't believe this or face social death. It was here's an endless supply of dopamine so you never have to build anything real. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's both for each in its own degree, but I agree that one draw is more powerful to men and one draw is more powerful to women. And that's part of why we're seeing these disparate politics. Okay, let me pause, tell you about our next sponsor, and that is Crowd Health. So health insurance has become so complicated. It's become a huge mess. You want it because you're afraid not to have it, because you have been told that if you don't have health insurance, you are, basically just SOL. Like you don't have a way to pay for anything and you're going to have to pay out of pocket tens of thousands of dollars. But that is not necessarily true. In fact, sometimes even with health insurance, you are paying tens of thousands of dollars anyway. And with those restrictive doctors networks and the high premiums and deductibles, it might just be time to opt out altogether and join Crowd Health. You join a crowd of like-minded people who want to help each other pay for their medical events. We use Crowd Health. It has worked great so far. We're very thankful for it. You pay a fee every month that feeds into the crowd. And then when someone has a health emergency, they pay the first $500 and then the crowd steps in to cover the rest. And the same is true for you. It's really like having each other's back. And it's I think, like a very biblical way to help take care of one another. The crowd really is working together to make sure that you're cared for. They also have bill negotiators, lower cost prescriptions and labs, doctors vetted for quality and affordability. And again, if something major happens, just cover the first portion and the crowd takes care of the rest. With my code Allie, you only have to pay $99 for the first 3 months. That's a great deal. Join crowdhealth.com, code Allie. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. Also, there's the university influence. We've got the ratio of liberal professors to conservatives. It was 2-1 in 1995. Can you imagine? I remember the conservative professors that I had in college. I went to school at a small school in South Carolina, graduated in 2014. And I remember then, because, there were the debates about gay marriage and all of that, wokeness was definitely in the air a little bit. I took some classes. Probably my most liberal class was my religion class, who said that God's love was too big to only allow Jesus to be the only way to heaven. And I was like, well, isn't it loving that he sent anyway to get to heaven? And of course, that was not met with very much acceptance from that professor. I also had another professor who said that gender and sex are two different things. And I, just completely ignorant of that argument, said, no, they're not. They're synonyms. And that person actually didn't say anything. But that's changed a lot. That was only however many years ago that was, 12 years ago that I was in college, and actually longer ago than that. But those professors, they might have said something, but you could push back in the classroom and you weren't probably going to get in trouble for it, because they knew that the student body was pretty conservative, that they had other administrators and other teachers who were conservative. Our president at the time was conservative, but then Furman got another president who was not conservative, and that changed a bunch of things. Went with the times, just like every other university. So now, or at least in 2019, it's probably even changed since then, progressives to conservatives, 6-1. 6-1. City Journal says that university faculty are more likely to self-identify as far left or very liberal than being on the right. So not even just liberal, but far left. College students are 60% female, according to the Department of Education. And women are also 7% more likely than men to graduate. And so that is also part of this. It's kind of a little bit of both, that you've got women who are making the universities safer from bad opinions, and more liberal, and liberals who are and universities who are making those women more liberal. It's kind of that feedback loop. This person, Vittorio, claims that this has created an echo chamber that has further entrenched college-educated women into their political views. Quote, 4 years surrounded by peers who all believe the same thing, professors who all believe the same thing, reading lists pointing in one direction. Disagreement is not even rare, it is socially punished. Yes, we've seen that. We've talked to people like that on this show. You learn to pattern match. That's an interesting phrase. The acceptable opinions and perform them. Pattern matching is actually a very important part of just like getting along socially. And I do think getting along socially in some level of uniformity and behavior and customs is important for the social contract in any country. But but there are bad things to be uniformed about. You don't want to be uniformed and be communist. When you're uniformed communist, then people die. So that's kind of what's going on here. And actually, I don't even have this in front of me, but I'm about to talk about this on Fox, actually, that women are more likely, according to a recent study, to be okay with political violence against their political enemies than liberal men or conservative men. Now, they're not always the ones carrying it out, but they are perpetuating this assassination culture. And that is just because they're progressive, and far left progressives are always violent. They just are. Quote from this article, then they graduate into female-dominated fields, HR, social work, media, education, healthcare, nonprofits, where the monoculture continues. From 18 to 35, many women never encounter sustained disagreement from people they respect. Gosh, this just enlightens my DMs on Instagram so much. It does really seem like sometimes, and when I did that surrounded debate where it was me, 20 so-called liberal Christians, the reason why I wasn't that, it felt pretty simple for me. Like, I don't want to say easy because, debates are hard, but the reason why I was not thrown off is because I had heard every single one of those arguments before. As a conservative, you're not part of the zeitgeist. So you're always seeing those arguments on social media, in Hollywood, but understand that progressives never have to be met with a conservative view if they don't want to. They don't have to. They don't have to watch Trump. They don't have to listen to Vance. They don't have to listen to Relatable. They should have to. They should have to listen to Relatable. And if I'm ever queen, you heard me, queen, you have to listen to Relatable. That's part of the deprogramming that we are going to put in place. Anyway, they don't have to listen to a conservative opinion or a different opinion. They can go to work, they can go to school, they can talk to their friends, they can live in a liberal place and literally never hear a conservative opinion. But I have to hear liberal opinions all of the time, which is actually helpful. It makes us smarter because you can think about, okay, well, what is the rebuttal to that? And when you think through rebuttals, it just makes you a better thinker and a better communicator. And liberals really never have to do that, which is why I would think, when you're talking to your liberal aunt, why she just immediately gets angry and insults you. Maybe not always. I hope that you have a very sweet, bleeding heart liberal aunt who is not a radical. But that's why a lot of your friends just start calling you names. If you point out, hey, is there any other scenario in which you think it's okay to kill a living human being, like an innocent human being, to try to get them to think about why they justify abortion and not other kinds of murder, and they just get mad at you? Yeah, well, they've never heard that before. And it's uncomfortable, going back to the beginning, it's uncomfortable to think because it puts you in the social outgroup. And that feels like suicide for a lot of women. Vittorio argues that also marriage fundamentally changes a woman's relationship to the government. We see this data right here. Quote, single women interact with government more as provider of services. Married women interact with the government more as a taker of taxes. True. Fewer women are wanting to get married and have kids, as we see. And that actually, can we put that graph back up? That graph shows that the more married you are, if you are married, you are more likely to be Republican. And if you are single, you are more likely to be Democrat. Now, I've got single conservative friends. By the way, if you're a single conservative relatable, I've got a couple friends that I could set you up with. But it's rare, as you can see. Most of them are going to be Democrat. And that's because I also think marriage and stability and responsibility, and it just has a conservatizing nature to it and a Christianizing nature. It just makes you think differently. When you have kids, you have this biological stake in the future, and you see how policies and how culture, not just policies, but social views affect them. Like, I know that there are some crazy parents out there. We know that. But it's like, yeah, you think, oh, it's insane to believe that a man can become a woman. But then when you have kids, you're like, oh my gosh, this precious boy or this precious girl that I know has been a boy or a girl since the moment of conception inside my womb, they want to change that. They want to change this kid. They want to propagandize this person and make him feel like he's born in the wrong body. It just becomes a lot more real. So I think you just become more conservative and even more religious the more married you are, which is exactly why all the powers that be are trying to disincentivize marriage and disincentivize having kids, because you're just more progressive. You rely on the government. It ushers in their progressive communist utopia. If women continue to be useful idiots of communism and socialism, the more single they are, the more likely they are to be that. All right, I got to pause to tell you about our next sponsor before we talk about the rest of this, and that is Reprev. So thankful for Reprev. I have been using the powder that you put in the water and you mix it together because it's got all of these incredible ingredients that have a calming effect. And after I talk about this kind of stuff, I kind of need to calm down because I had like my 3 cups of coffee this morning. I'm wound up by the stuff that I see on social media, and sometimes I just need to take a chill pill. But this is better than a pill. This is like chill powder. It's got magnesium, it's got GABA, it's got tart cherry extract, it's got L-theanine. All of these researched back ingredients are so good for your body, and your body needs them to get to a state of calm. And so I love this. It tastes really good. It's really easy. It's just a great thing to add to your day, especially at night. If you have a hard time winding down and getting your mind to calm down, you should try Reprev. You're really going to like it. It's from the Wholesome Company. Go to wholesomeisbetter.com. Use code Allie. You'll get 20% off your order, even if you've ordered before. Wholesomeisbetter.com, code Allie. Okay, just to let you know, I had 2 other huge stories that we were going to talk about today, and we can't get to them. So I do just want to say that I do want to talk about that story of the Trump administration allegedly allowing millions of dollars to go back to Planned Parenthood that had kind of been suspended from them. And that is really important. We have all the research right in front of us, but this story and my little rant at the beginning ended up taking longer than we thought. I'm not ignoring that. That's an important story. I am not afraid to call out the Trump administration if all of that is true. I want to make sure that all of it is true because I want this presidency to be pro-life. I want them to defund Planned Parenthood entirely. I want Planned Parenthood to be abolished. I want abortion to be abolished, which would put Planned Parenthood out of a job. And so I want all of that. And so we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about, we've been meaning to talk about this for weeks, this Chinese surrogacy story. Also, Meghan Trainor using a surrogate. Come on. Like, we got to know that womb renting at this point is so unethical. So we'll get to that at some point. Honestly, only 2 monologues a week is tough for you, girl. I like the cadence, but I got a lot to say if you haven't noticed. And people ask me, how do you find, all the subjects to talk about? I'm like, no, I can't find the hours to talk about them. That's the real problem. We got a lot going on in this world. Okay, so as of 2023, 67% of the nation's 12th graders say that they will likely choose to get married someday, down from 80% in 1993. That's bleak. Another 24% say they don't know if they'll get married, up from 16%. The share saying they don't plan on getting married someday is largely unchanged. A smaller share of 12th graders now than in 1993, say they're very likely to stay married to the same person for life if they do tie the knot. About half say this compared to 59% in 1993. Both those numbers are bad. The share of 12th graders who say they're very likely to want to have kids in this situation has also decreased. 64% in 1993, 48% in 2023. That's not good. I just watched this clip from Dax Shepard, He's married to Kristen Bell, best known as Kristen Bell's husband. Kristen Bell, best known as Princess Anna. And they were talking about their daughter, and I think their daughter is like 11. And he was saying how he is going to pay for his daughter to freeze her eggs when she turns 18. She asked him, or they were talking about when to get married and have kids. And he said, oh yeah, I think you'll have kids from, any time between 35 and 45. And he said his daughter said, oh, that's too old. I want to do that in my mid-20s. And he says, oh no, she's going to be having too much fun in her 20s to think about getting married and having kids. So I'm just going to have her freeze her eggs so she doesn't have to think about that. Okay, I am so disgusted by that, Dax Shepard. So disgusted. That is a horrible parenting fail. I mean, how immature and short-sighted. First of all, it's bad for your body to freeze your eggs. You have to pump yourself with all kinds of artificial hormones to do that. To do that to an 18-year-old, that can seriously mess your body up. And by the way, it increases your chances of ovarian cancer as well as breast cancer. All right. So that's not good. And then later you have to go through IVF. You have to then implant that inseminated egg into your body unless you rent the womb of another person, and you have to pump yourself with artificial hormones to do that, which again is bad for you. And there's a reason, by the way, biologically we were designed to have children at a certain age for the most part. But I'm just wondering how many conversations are being had like this, and is that why so many kids these days are saying they don't want to get married? How many parents are actually influencing their kids to say, oh, no, you don't want to have kids in your mid-20s when you're a young adult, when it's the easiest to have kids, by the way. No. You want to push that off until you're 40 years old. Let's just freeze your eggs. You want to pursue your career. You want to have fun. You want to party. You want to get your heart broken and your body defiled by all of these people who won't love you forever. I mean, that's horrible advice. And I'm sure he's not the only one. Maybe not saying I'll pay for you to get your eggs frozen, but encouraging their girls and their boys to just explore the world. That's terrible advice. You should take advice. Well, you should take advice from your parents if they're wise, but if not, take advice from me. If you have the option to get married to a godly man or woman in your early 20s, you should. Not everyone has that option. Sometimes you don't meet the right person until you're 35, and that is God's plan for your life. But if you have the option to get married, get married. If you have the option to have kids, have kids. I had my first at 26, I believe. And I should have started earlier. I think I should have started earlier. And it all worked out. I'm very thankful for the 3 kids that I have. But I even know that having my third at 31 was different than having my first at 26. Your body just changes. Not discouraging people from having kids when they're older, but we have to think about these biological realities, and that these biological realities and subduing them on purpose to chase lesser things actually has an impact on our psychology and on our politics. Boys are more likely than girls to say that they want to get married one day. This was not always the case. In 1993, a larger share of girls than boys said that they wanted to get married. The share of boys saying this is virtually unchanged over the 30-year period. Again, this just goes to show how much has changed for girls. If you look at what Gen Z women are prioritizing. NBC had something interesting. They had this chart. I think we have it that we can put up. If you are a female who voted for Harris, the number one thing you care about is having a job or a career that you find fulfilling. Same thing for a male who voted for Harris. Female who voted for Trump, achieving financial independence. Male who voted for Trump, having children. You sweet men. For even the female who voted Trump, having children was number 6. Okay. Now, being married fell under having children for men, which I thought was interesting. Having children was number 10 on the priority list for men who voted for Harris. Having children was number 12 out of 13 in the list of priorities for women who voted for Harris. So this is just a huge priority gap, as well as just a a politics gap and the value gap. And I think the choices gap and the politics gap are really feeding each other. Okay, let's skip all the way down. Let's skip down to the faith segment because we've got a lot in here and we need to wrap up within the next few minutes. Women are trying to fare life without faith more so than men are. There's a spiritual crisis going on here. If we put up, let's see, let's do full screen 12 first, a 25-year reversal in men and women's church attendance. So for the first time, I'm looking at this chart. It looks like for the first time, maybe ever, but this chart only goes to 2000, more men, I guess for the past few years, more men have been attending church than women. 45% of men in America attend church weekly. You go, men. 36% of women. And I just think a lot of women's ministries try to reach these women by being more liberal, and it just makes the problem worse. Because look, if you're getting liberal progressivism from church, then you might as well go to brunch. You can get that from your gal pals. You don't need it from your pastor. If your pastor sounds just like the world or your women's ministry sounds just like the social media activist that you follow, then you don't need to go to church. I'm not saying that they need to be preaching conservative politics, although if you are in line with the Bible, like your politics will get more conservative. They just will. But you should be preaching the Bible. You should be preaching the Bible, even when it makes women mad. And you should just go all in on the truth and believe that that God can soften their hearts. Just be faithful. Don't try to reach women by, being more trendy and being more liberal. It's just not going to work. And it just exacerbates the problem. All right. We've got more about how women are faring without faith and what this means for their mental health and what this means for their politics. And then lastly, what we should actually do about it. Let me go ahead and tell you about our last sponsor for the day. It's an amazing sponsor. It's EveryLife. It is the pro-life diaper company. We use EveryLife in our home. We love EveryLife diapers. They're not only great, clean materials, but they also work. I mean, they last all night. You don't have to worry about leaks and things like that. Their wipes are great. I love all of the materials that they use, all natural. They also have a women's care line. So important that we get feminine care, that we get diapers from people who know that life inside the womb matters and also the definition of a woman. So partner with EveryLife, switch to their products today. You will be so glad you did. Go to everylife.com. Use code Allie10. You'll get 10% off your first order. Everylife.com, code Allie10. More than 1/3 of women report having been diagnosed with depression compared to 1 in 5 men. That's why so many women are on SSRIs. SSRIs can actually exacerbate your mental health problems, your propensity towards violence, instability, and all of that. Dr. Arthur Brooks explains that it's even higher among white liberal women. SOT 1.
Very interesting new data show that white liberal women under 30 have almost a 6 in 10 chance of having been diagnosed with a mental illness in America today. It's a really big problem. And there's lots of speculation on what that has to do with politics, what it has to do with race, what it has to do with age, et cetera, et cetera. But what you find is that this is a group that's really, really struggling. And it's a pity because it's not good for them. It's not good for society. And that's what we see.
Yeah. Progressivism is inherently destabilizing. That's why that's why Renee Good happened. She thought she was a hero. She and her lesbian partner thought that they were heroes. They put themselves, in opposition to armed officers, try to run one over. I don't know if she tried to run one over with her car, but she did. And he had internal bleeding, and it's a horrible situation. And it was the radicalization that got her there. We did an episode about that. It kind of dovetails really nicely with this episode. I'm just so interested in the subject because I really care about women, and I care about girls being raised in the truth. And I just see this response to liberal feminism on the right, and maybe among some men on the right, that actually is vile and hates women and actually thinks women are inherently not valuable, inherently not smart, have nothing to contribute, and are basically slaves. And that is not true. That's not the position I have. Women are made in the image of God, fully valuable. Christianity offers the value and the substance and the meaning and fulfillment to women that they are trying to find elsewhere, that they are looking to Glennon Doyle for and to Jen Hatmaker for, and they're not finding. They're just finding, more vapidity, if that's even a word. I don't think it's vapidness. The noun of vapid. We'll go with vapidity. They're just finding less and less substance and more just anger and bitterness. Turn to Jesus. I'm not just trying to make you be Republican. I just want you to know where your identity lies, that you can have the stability and the love that you're looking for in Christ. It's not going to be found in a one-night stand. It's not going to be found in social justice. It's not going to be found in your activism. It's only going to be found in him. And then, once you're there, I feel like, okay, we might disagree on politics and we might still disagree on some policy, but ultimately that's where I want you to go. But liberal politics is just an overflow of not being in alignment with scripture. That's going to scandalize some people, but it's just true. Okay, what does the Bible have to say about all of this? Because men and women are different, both sinful, both sinned in the garden, but sinned in different ways. I just want to read this passage. It's a little bit long, but I think so much of life's lessons can be learned from just the first 3 chapters of the Bible. This is Genesis 3, 1 through 13. And just kind of make your own observations as you hear me read this. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You shall not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. And the eyes of both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. And then it goes on. The man blamed the woman blamed the snake, and of course the rest is a brutal, bloody, and very sinful history that is thankfully redeemed through Jesus Christ. So I would love for you to comment on YouTube or on Spotify in that passage. What are some things that jumped out at you? I'm sure you've read that before, but what are some things that jumped out at you about Eve and the nature of that first temptation? What Satan asked her, how she responded, what that means about her belief about God in that moment and trusting him. I always learn something new every time I read that passage. Like Eve, some women in scripture have led men in their lives to be led astray. When we look at 1 Kings, for example, when we look at Herod's wife in the New Testament, 1 Kings, let me explain that a little bit. 1 Kings 21, of course, Jezebel promoted Baal worship, persecuted prophets. And then in the New Testament, John the Baptist was beheaded at the behest of Herod's wife. And then also the Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy 3, 6 through 7 warns that for among them are those who false teachers, among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women burdened with sins and led astray by various passions, always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of truth. So at the end of the day, God's way is better. In Christ, you'll find fulfillment, you'll find satisfaction, you'll find stability, you'll find reasonableness, you'll find rationality. Use your brain. Do not suspend your compassion and your love for other people, but don't allow that love and compassion to paralyze your brain from thinking, especially when we are making policy decisions. Stop reading romantic smut. Stop following these liberal activists that claim to be nuanced and in the middle, but never had these complaints in the past administrations. I do encourage you. Both of my books speak to this issue, especially toxic empathy. And it is not about suspending compassion at all. It is about understanding true compassion and wielding it in a way that is truthful and helpful. And then You're Not Enough is really about who we are and identity in Christ, and not believing that the self is the answer to all of our problems. So I do encourage you to get both of those on Amazon. They're always linked in the description of this episode. All right, guys, that's all we got time for today. We will be back here on Wednesday.